Golden Black Live, early edition. Brian Newbert joins me Friday, February the 26th. Hard to believe we're at the end of the month and getting close to March Madness, obviously. And Brian Purdue fans have been waiting for this game. Maybe it's kind of ebbed and flowed in terms of where Maryland has been and where Purdue has been, but a 4 o'clock kind of primetime type game tomorrow when Maryland comes calling into Mackey Arena.
Yeah, obviously a really big game for both teams. Maryland's number 10 in the rankings now. Not that the rankings make all that big a difference. They're still in the Big Ten championship race. They're trying to stay alive. They're probably a little bit on the outside looking in, but they're trying to stay alive. So this is a really important game for them. Really important game for Purdue to get another resume type of win, to get back in a positive direction after Purdue hasn't played all that well lately. So good for momentum for Purdue if they can win this game, kind of wrapping up the regular season. So a really important game for both teams. Purdue's played a lot better at home, obviously, than they have on the road. So that certainly bodes well for Purdue's chances tomorrow too.
Yeah, the Terrapins have a chance with four conference losses. They can still work their way into the Big Ten championship, or at least a share of it. But they've got to win out. They have obviously got to go to Purdue. They have to go to Indiana as well, playing Illinois at home. We'll talk a little bit about that and tournament seedings, NCAA tournament seedings later in the show with Jerry Palm. Today's show also, DeAndre Smith will be joining us in segment 2. We're starting a little bit early. I'm wearing the Purdue Center for Cancer Research, or the Purdue Challenge T-shirt, during our photo shoot today with Coach Darrell Hazel right at 3 o'clock, so we're ducking out a little bit early for that. And obviously the Purdue Challenge asking you to save the date for April the 16th. Cammie, I don't know whether you can throw up the board here real quick, but just some information on that. For those that are interested in it, we've got a lot of participation from our folks at Golden Black and our readers and viewers over the years. 8:30 a.m., the same day as the spring games. It's kind of a save the date, but you can register online at thepurduechallenge.com. So I appreciate you putting that up, Cammie, and we're looking forward to that as well. Brian, a lot to be said. The Indiana game, obviously, Purdue had a pretty marked comeback at the end of that game to make it very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. And yet, you say, well, Purdue hasn't been playing as well of late. It's been disappointing on weekends. Purdue has not won a home game, only won one game on a weekend, I think, since December the 12th, that being Nebraska. But what is it going to take for this team, do you think, from that standpoint of just getting over the hump? And is it just a matter of a lot of teams are going through what Purdue is, or how do you view that?
Don't turn the ball over. Well, first of all, it's hard to win on the road.
Yeah, no question.
Second, it's really hard to win on the road when you turn the ball over too much. And when you look at Purdue's lack of success on the road, there's a pretty strong correlation with turnovers. That was the reason Purdue lost at Indiana. You can point to a lot of different things, but if Indiana doesn't get 20 points off Purdue turnovers, including 14 off the first 5, setting the tone for the entire game, that's an entirely different basketball game. Maryland, they did not turn the ball over very much at Maryland. They played very well in that phase of the game in College Park, but they make 3 of 25 three-pointers. So when it's not been the turnovers, it's been something else. But you have to figure the shooting normalizes in Mackey Arena, and if they don't turn the ball over like they did at Indiana, at Michigan, wherever else, at Illinois especially, then you have to figure Purdue's got a pretty good chance. Purdue's much better at home than they are on the road.
No doubt. No, and it's been that way, and it's not all that much different than a lot of other teams. Purdue is still, interestingly, in the Big Ten tournament picture. Maybe I'm the only one that cares about whether they have a double bye or not, but they still are in the hunt for that. If Purdue can win out, and that's a big if, but the Boilermakers have the games obviously Saturday against Maryland, and they go to Nebraska on Tuesday and finish up at home against Wisconsin. If they can win out, and Wisconsin can win 2 out of 3 games, and Maryland has to lose, obviously at Indiana, there's some scenarios there, but Purdue would be the 4 seed in that scenario and might line up with a semifinal matchup with Indiana. But that's part of the fun of this time of year, is trying to look at those kinds of things. The interesting thing about the Indiana game is, and we've hit on this kind of as a common theme, Purdue shoots the ball very well in Bloomington. I mean, they shoot 60% or did for much of the game at that level. Made a lot of threes down the stretch, kind of the lightning round. They got themselves back into the game. You glean anything from that, just in terms of, is it just an on-again, off-again deal? Is this truly a team, if they can hit on all cylinders, they're as dangerous as anybody?
Yeah, just don't turn the ball over.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
what gets back to that.
Purdue has 3 big men they run their offense through. Those guys are 17 to 20 from the floor. When you take out jump shots, they're 15 to 20 overall. When Purdue got the ball where it wanted to be, they scored. They were 9 and 19 from 3. You take that any day of the week when you're this team on the road playing in Assembly Hall. Any day of the week you take that. 13 turnovers, though, which isn't an obnoxious number, but when you look at what the turnovers turn into, that's where the problem lies. Purdue just maximizes its possessions, doesn't give offense to the opponent via its own offense, and it's a pretty tough team to beat.
Yeah, and Maryland, and certainly Indiana, also Purdue's inability to turn over IU when the Hoosiers were one of the worst in the conference in terms of in terms of turnovers. And Purdue, I think, only caused 4 during the course of the game.
Yeah, Purdue forces almost fewer turnovers than anybody in the country. I think they're like 5th to last in Division I in forcing turnovers, which runs completely counter to their longtime identity defensively. That's a defensive issue, but it's also an offensive issue because you get so very little transition off of that stuff. You get so few easy baskets. When you have to play in the half court all the time, the margin for error is significantly lower. You commit more turnovers. You have to deal with more stuff from an opposing defense perspective. There's a certain amount of safe cracking that goes into scoring in the half court when you play through the post the way you do, and you see all these kind of junk defenses that people are throwing at you. It's just a really difficult thing. If Purdue can get more easy baskets off their defense, that would really reduce its margin for error.
Yeah, no question on that front. And the environment tomorrow, obviously, tickets are, if you look at the world of StubHub or SeatGeek, up there in price. It's going to be should be a very loud, raucous crowd in Mackey Arena. Again, the ability to win 2 games from a resume standpoint, and again, we'll hit Jerry Palm on this question as well, but the opportunity to beat 2 top 10 teams, if you include the win over Michigan State, certainly is going to be important. But I think there's also something to be said for the team right now and the program, just to have that shot of adrenaline, just because there's been some feeling, 9-6 in the conference is, I struggle with the notion this team is underachieved, but I do think that like a lot of teams right now, you hit the February wall to some extent. You got to push past that if you're Purdue.
Unfulfilling is the word I use. People ask, is this season disappointing so far? Well, I always come back with, there were a lot of questions coming into this season, and when you look at the polls, when you look at the expectations preseason, Purdue's right about where it was supposed to be. It's just people expected a lot of this team. That's a good problem to have when your fan base cares that much. But there's a certain measure of unfulfilling, I guess, is the best way to put it. I don't want to say disappointing. The story of the season is not written by a long stretch.
Yeah, that to me is the big story.
But
is not
Purdue's obviously had some opportunities to win some games that maybe if you had them over again, you win. I know that means nothing in the final analysis, but when you look at the Illinois game, when you could not defend 2 good perimeter scorers, you look at the Michigan game where you had that. You look at Maryland when you had a great chance to win that game in College Park and just didn't do what you had to do in the last 6 minutes. Purdue could be in a much better position than it's in right now.
And I think, too, you start the season at 11-0 and look quasi-invincible, and that's maybe overstated, but that has certainly played a factor as well. There are other teams that are going through this. I mean, look at Maryland right now. I mean, here's a team that's lost 2 out of 3 games in conference play. People really doubting Iowa, a team that we thought was invincible maybe 3 to 4 weeks ago, and now is having a hard time beating everybody. I mean, it's a common thread around the league.
College basketball's a roller coaster. Teams have their ups and downs, and it's all a matter of having your ups at the right time and your downs at the right time. And maybe Purdue had its up right off the bat. Iowa had its up right at the start of the Big Ten season. Maryland seems to be trending downward. Wisconsin's certainly on the uptick. We'll see where Purdue is here in about 3-4 weeks. That's what matters the most.
And that is the truest statement in terms of that, in terms of where the Boilermakers will get seated, but also just that it's just so much emphasis on the tournament. It's even more than it's ever been, I think. And it seems to be growing every year in terms of that. Anything else that you're looking for in the matchup with Maryland tomorrow that's in a unique one because of some of the things that Maryland brings to the table from an offensive standpoint? But what are you watching for most, especially after you saw the game in College Park?
Purdue's got to disrupt Melo Trimble as much as it can. You know, Melo Trimble is a great point guard. He's committed 18 turnovers in the last 3 games. He's been a turnover machine lately. He's not shooting the ball well at all. Purdue's got to disrupt him as much as possible, try to force him into one of these kind of train wreck games he's had lately for them. They have to close out on shooters because Robert Carter, obviously from the 4 position, made a bunch of threes against them last time.
Bad.
Purdue's 5 men. That is such a problem for Purdue when big men can shoot. And Maryland has these 2 bookend forwards who are both 6'9", 6'10", who can really shoot threes. And Purdue's not the quickest team baseline to baseline closing out on shooters. It's 5 men when they're caught in those positions really have a hard time getting out. You saw that at Indiana. You've seen that all throughout the season. And Purdue's just got to match up better with big men who can shoot.
All right, we're going to have Brian take a break and bring in Coach DeAndre Smith and Stacy Clarity. We'll look forward to some football talk. We've had been lucky the last couple of weeks to have really good guests from the new Purdue assistant coaches, and DeAndre will be interesting to hear a little bit more about him, talk to him. We will do that in about 2 minutes when we return to Golden Black Live.